Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Middle Class Hub, India's first platform exclusively for the middle class. We at Middle Class Hub always feel that we shouldn't just be talking about the middle class issues, but rather we should be talking to the middle class also, and also to the policy experts who can give a sound understanding of what middle class is, what constitutes middle class, the various challenges, opportunities, and I would rather say the frustration that lingers often when it comes to the Indian middle class. So today we are in conversation with Dr. Nilesh Nilmani, an educationist par excellence from management and commerce discipline. Now he has close to 2 decades of experience working in various organizations, and right now he's working with ICSI. So today through this conversation, we would like to have his views on what he thinks constitutes India's the great Indian middle class, challenges which he sees that the Indian middle class always faces, and the opportunities, the importance of education for the middle class families in India. And also we would like to find out whether he himself considers to be middle class or not. So let's find out. Welcome, Dr. Nilesh Nilmani. It's a pleasure to have you with Middle Class Hub, India's first platform for the middle class.
I thank the entire team of Middle Class Hub for giving me an opportunity to express my view as a middle class person and a person who is making certain policy changes for people, particularly in the education sector, in the middle class and all the stratum of the society. I would like to put here that the views expressed by me are my individual views, and they do not reflect any of the sentiments of my present or past employers.
Okay. So we are starting on a very interesting note. You said you are a middle class person, right? Now, please help us define, because this is one thing that through our platform, we try to arrive at a definition, maybe in the days to come, in the months or in years to come. What constitutes middle class? Can you help us define this?
See, for this, before I quote my example and I put myself into the frame of how I qualify to be called a middle class person and how I carry those sentiments, I would like to draw the attention of the audience towards the classification and the genesis of the classification of middle class. So we need to try to understand that it all happened in the year 1941 when Mr. Warner in United States of America tried to classify the society and try to gauge the consumerism pattern which could be there in the United States of America at that point of time. And he came out with 3 classes, which is namely lower, middle, and upper. And he then divided each of them into 2 classes. So lower, middle, and upper. So it becomes lower, 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 upper. Then it becomes lower, middle, and upper, middle. And then it becomes lower, upper, and upper, upper. So this way the society can be classified into 6 classes. Apart from that, if we can see the roots of definition of middle class or the classes, then we can very well see it post the Renaissance in the Europe and the advent of the Industrial Revolution. So all these together brought in a class which was working class, and then working class itself classified into 2 different classes. One which was working with maybe skilled, better skills, and the other one who was working on the field. And this is how we can see the 2 ways in which middle class has been described historically.
That's a very comprehensive way of defining middle class. And what I gather that the consumerist pattern, the consumerism behavior, to say, that is very crucial when it comes to deciding who constitutes middle class. Now, I would like you to share some light on the political significance of middle class, if any, because there is this growing sense of disillusionment with the entire system when it comes to the Indian middle class. We are often, the moment we open our phone lines, we are inundated with calls from different sections of the society, all coming from Indian middle class. And there is a sense of, I would say, frustration that they are nowhere in the scheme of things when it comes to the government policies. So can you just talk a little bit on that?
I would just like to say that when we talk about politics, we cannot talk about politics in isolation. So wherever globally we consider politics, it's about political economy. And when we talk about political economy, we all can see that the middle class has been growing. I hope we all may be remembering one very popular phrase which started during the late 90s, and it was there in the first part of the millennium, the burgeoning middle class, which was which literally meant the growing middle class. And then there was another word also, which was on and off connoted to a certain section of society, which was known as bourgeois mentality, right? So why I am bringing in these terms, that when we look from the political economy perspective, what happens that the entire market is there to be utilized for the growth of the economy, right? So what happens that if we can see the international economy, consumerism has been brought in very tactfully by bringing in beauty pageants, contests for people becoming Mr. Universe, top 10 people coming to Mr. Universe, and then the jury were very particular in trying to disperse or disseminate the awards across the geographical boundaries. We could see people coming from Southeast Asia into the Mr. Universe contests and the other beauty pageants. So what I feel that internationally also the political economy is all towards driving the consumerism sentiment in individuals. For if we talk about India as an economy, then I would like to say that much has changed in the last 25 years. And I could very well relate myself to the middle class when it was the year 97, 98, when seeing a mobile phone into one person's hand was significance of that person having a very extravagant kind of lifestyle, or maybe that person is a top notch. But today, we can see that we all are having mobile phones which are much of better configuration, and we all can see that today the availability, the digital divide which was there, has also been bridged to a greater extent.
That's true. You mentioned about the 91 economic liberalization. I also believe personally that the middle class was the biggest beneficiary of that, the whole process of opening up of the markets, and it actually pulled many out of the lower, I would say, some maybe below the poverty line people also broke into the middle class. I'm saying only in terms of getting new opportunities. So the wealth started coming, to this class thanks to liberalization. But the concern is, which we always face at middle class, sir, that happened 30 years back, 3 decades. Now I'll just try to make it slightly topical with the context of what's happening around in the national capital and the national capital region. You see, these are not our individual views, my individual views, but this is what I'm hearing from the people because they keep calling us. Now, see, right now this protests going around for the farm laws that have been passed by the parliament. Nothing on that. I mean, it's their concern. That's between the government and the farmers to decide. Now, why I'm bringing out this here on this forum is, now there is a concern that you see that something might happen to the farmers, their land holdings, or whatever other genuine concerns they may have. So there is a fear that it might happen, and then of course the process of protests and all started, and the blockade started, and we see right from the Prime Minister down to the Home Minister, Agriculture Minister, the top ministers, bureaucrats of the government, issuing statement, at least talking about the issue. That's a good encouraging sign for any democracy. See, the point is, here there is one feeling of some uncertainty that might happen to a particular section of our society. And they have jammed the roads, blocked the roads. Now you see the middle class in comparison to that. I can give you example of several such financial institutions going bankrupt, like the less recent one being Punjab and Maharashtra Cooperative Bank. You must be knowing that a lot of depositors have lost their money. It's been 1.5 years. Is their money that's already gone, and there is no guarantee of them even getting back their money. Now, the point is, there is nothing constructive happening on that front. So is it because, why I want to bring you back to that topic, is it why because there is no political cost to pay when you ignore middle class interests now in 2020? Is that the case? Because farmers constitute a sizable vote bank. For other than that also, of course, they are very important. They are our, they provide us what we eat. But don't middle class matter if they are so important for the economic development of the country? How can people lose their money? And I've known several people have died, they have lost their lives, but there is nothing happening. So is it something to do with the fact that the middle class doesn't constitute a sizable vote bank? So I would like you to talk on that, sir.
This is a very, very sentimental issue. So we have to carry it with utmost care. So there are two parts to it. If we go and read the news of the people who have died, I am utterly surprised that the people who have died are very, very poor farmers, very poor farmers. And their mother and father, they are like saying that it was an 8-year loan term which was there. We had already paid 7 years of loan. So 1 year of that loan was still to be paid. The land is mortgaged for certain reasons. I'm not taking away anything from the protesters, but my only humble submission is that you can protest being in your lands also. There is no need to come to on the road. No need to behave like people with force. When we talk about the Kisan unions or the trade unions, I would just like to draw the attention of the audience towards one landmark trade union decision which happened in Manesar when it was in the Maruti Suzuki plant. The general manager, HR, was lynched by the workers who were agitated. And then there was a talk between the policymakers and the management of the company, and it was basically a set off between the trade union leaders and the company. And nothing much came to the hands of the people who were agitating. Here it is very important to understand that the middle class is always looking towards leaders. These leaders could be union leaders. These could be leaders who have been elected. I believe that leaders who have been elected must be respected in all regard. Nothing to encourage or nothing to say positive about this government, but what I feel and I have experienced that the kind of policies which have been unleashed by this government, it strengthens the middle class to do whatever they want to do. Today we are seeing that record number of startups are coming up with the Mudra Finance Yojana, which is there. We can see that the subsidies are going directly into the accounts of the people. We are seeing that middlemen are being taken off from all the sections of the transactions between the middle class and the government. So these laws are also there to support the middle class in reality. My question remains that on this very topic, farmers, that if we are talking about the Kisan union leaders, where were they when the Kisan or the farmers had to leave their crop in the field, had to commit suicide? Why did they not create protests then? Why did not they demanded whatever changes they deem fit at that point in time? So we need to understand very wisely that leaders, and these Kisan leaders in particular, they may be having certain agenda, but what I as an individual feel that they are not definitely for the benefit of the middle class. The government is thinking for the middle class and the farmers across the nation. We don't have to make it a divide between regions.
That's very nicely put. Now I'll want you to talk about your passion, what you have been doing in the field of education for last so many years. And education is one tool, I would say more so for the middle class family, if I put it that way. It's an important tool to better your life and of course to move up the ladder of success, whatever be the definition of success of that person. How important, what have you been doing regarding digitization of the whole educational system, more so in this year, current pandemic year? And if you could touch upon the importance of growing as a middle class boy, how important was education for a typical Indian middle class family? If you could touch upon that, sir.
Education is an agony for the typical middle Indian class family. For in my years of struggle as a person from the lower middle income group, I feel that education is all sponsorship based, infrastructure based, and your talent could be recognized only when it is having some kind of infrastructural support. The reason is very simple, that there is asymmetry in the way education is imparted from one region to another. A university in not so developed states and the central universities in the developed states have a large amount of disparity in the way the syllabus is construed and in the way the teachers are recruited and in the way the education is imparted. There is a divide in that. So the first thing which we need to do is we need to bridge this gap. In my present role, I am monitoring around close to 4 lakh students who are getting the education through distance education mode. We have digitized the entire content, and we are also examining and assessing the capabilities of these students on an online platform. So it to a certain extent bridges the gap between a person who is sitting in Delhi or a person who is sitting in Daulatabad. So it does not make any difference. The content is same, the assessment platform is same, and the evaluation is same. So this is how we are contributing towards bridging the gap in way the education is being imparted to individuals in India.
Okay. It's been tough here, no doubt, more so for the education sector, because even when we talk about this digitization of the whole education process, as you rightly mentioned, there is a huge digital divide between what is always referred as a gap between India and Bharat. So that also is one area when you talk about the interiors, tier 2, tier 3 cities, you get into the interiors of the country. There's a lack of internet access, lack of infrastructure, required infrastructure. So that is, of course, a lot has been done. You have been doing through your organization, ICSI, and I believe a lot more needs to be done as we move ahead, because this maybe could be do you think this could be the new normal, as even in the post-pandemic era, the digital education, the digital mode of providing education? Is it like...
I wish, hope and pray that this becomes the new normal. I believe I would be very happy interacting with candidates sitting in the remote locations and imparting my whatever intellectual input I can share with them. I try to do that on my individual level, connecting with people, identifying individuals who are struggling with education. But as an individual, you have limitations of time and the resources which you can provide to the beneficiaries. But if the entire system moves like that, then why about India? Uh, a person sitting in a district maybe block, maybe studying from Harvard Business School. So that is what I dream that it can happen, and it is very much possible. I am thankful to the Indian government that it is thinking on the lines that it will have every block connected with broadband. In one of my presentations for a competitive examination, I made a presentation wherein it was my sentiment that all the blocks in India should be connected with broadband. Then only we can see the real IT boom. Because 10 years ago, 2007-8, I'm talking about, we all were talking about the information technology boom. And then I told that if we have to go to the next leg of the IT boom, we have to connect each of the block with the broadband. Unfortunately, in all these years, BSNL has been forced to come to winding up its entity, because otherwise what I witnessed was that the landline connection was very much there in the block, even to the block offices. But as that has been distorted, it is a difficult task now.
Now, coming back to the challenges, as a middle class person, someone who is involved in policy making and also I would say in the execution of those policies, what do you think are the challenges that in today's time the Indian middle class families face?
If we talk about the challenges, the parameters of the challenges or the paradigms of the challenges have changed. From what was started by Mr. Warner in 1941 as a challenge or as a categorization of a middle class, or the challenges which are faced by the society in the form of middle class. Today, as an individual, I face a dilemma in defining that, because the moment we take off our attention from the socio-economic condition, particularly the economic condition, then the society you will find is into distress. Lot of emotional distress is there in the society. And people who are well off, they are facing all kind of emotional trauma. Majority of those trauma can be coming from abuses. Those abuses can be abuses of any nature. But the menace which drugs has brought into the society is really torturing the middle class like anything. Today, it is very difficult for a decent person, and when I quote decent, I mean the middle class, who is a hardworking person who goes to office or goes to his place of work, comes back and prays to the Almighty that everything be maintained in this manner so that he can pass on this lineage from one generation to another without confronting with people who are lunatics or maybe who have been duped into drugs. And I have nothing against those people who have been duped into drugs. I feel pity on them that they have been duped into drugs, because majority of these youth are the middle class. And I can see that the middle class is going to drain through the roots of drugs. This is my agony at this point of time. I believe, I hope and pray that the government of India comes out with some stringent norms wherein those people who are behind these drugs, entire gamut of affairs can be controlled, and the nation can breathe a very, very positive environment, positive air. Because the air is not polluted by the PM2 levels as of now, but the environmental degradation or the societal degradation because of these abuses.
Drug menace is something that's a very important issue you have highlighted. No doubt it has affected, I personally know it has destroyed so many middle class families. And of course, those in the policy making, those in sitting in the corridors of power, they must take note of it and shouldn't worry about the because there is always an economic aspect of everything. That is the most unfortunate part, and that keeps it sustaining, that keeps it going. So that's one area which the government must act really tough. I'm happy about the state Bihar, where even Gujarat, where at least they have made it illegal, even it comes to alcohol. Forget about drugs. But these issues, most of the time they create more problems than solutions. So a more holistic approach is needed, I believe. And drugs, of course, is something which must be curtailed with all the might of the government, because that's one thing which has no doubt destroyed so many young lives who could have been such great potential for our country. That's really true. And
I would just like to add on to what you have said. It's not only the responsibility of the government, but the responsibility is on the middle class. The upbringing of the children should be in such a manner that they should not feel that they belong to the affluent class. A middle class has to recognize that they belong to the middle class. That if that one generation does not earn for life, then they will be on roads, and then they will lose the status of being the middle class. So this is one statement through you I would like to convey to the entire society, the parents who are listening, that don't boast to your son or daughter that your father is well off. Today, the middle class is not having the kind of societal and the family responsibility which our father or our earlier generation used to carry. It was not limited to your kith and kin. It was limited to the extended society. Your neighbor who is three boundaries far, even they are, if they are in a financial crunch, people used to make corpus and support. But today, what has happened? It has become a very nuclear family, and we all know that kids are restricted mostly to one. I find nowadays in the educated society, at most it is two. So when you are maybe in the 2.5% to 5%, maybe the top 10% of the people who are paying the income tax, you are having that amount of disposable income, which through the pocket money which you are financing to your sons and your daughters, can be a potential pocket money to purchase drugs. My request, my folded hand request to the entire society through this forum is that please check that pocket money. You bring those toys, you bring those stationery, you bring those commodities to your kids. Don't give them cash. Let them be away from the people who are looking for kids who are having money in their pocket, and those money will be replaced by drugs in their pockets.
very well said. Very well said. I believe that this will go a long way in creating awareness regarding the drug menace that our society faces, and the families, the middle class families, would definitely take note of it, because this is one thing they just can't ignore, because it's gonna, as you rightly said, you will be pulled back to below the poverty line, because if someone's child gets into this, more so from the middle class, where one person earns through the life just to ensure that they make both ends meet. Because see, let's be honest about it, that's the reality. You have to work for till the time, the productive years of your life, maybe 60, 65. And then whatever you have to take care of the finances, the daily expenses, of course, education, health needs. So in between all this, at least there is no space for this kind of thing. So the parents must be very careful on that front. And you rightly said, I really like the way you put it, like middle class must realize that they are middle class. And that's the message must go to the coming generation, the next generation, that please realize you are middle class. That is not to say that you don't aspire to get into the so-called, I would say, elite club or the wealthier section of the society. But please understand, this understanding realization is very important, that you are middle class. And I really like that the way you said, when I said decent, I mean middle class. So that you have given me a couple of very brilliant headlines, I must say, for this interview. Now, Nilmani, I would like you to, we have talked a lot about the consumer behavior of the middle class, the economic importance of the middle class. uh, do you think that there are certain value set that is very characteristic of a middle class family? If you could talk about that.
I would like to quote one uh, couplet from Ramcharitmanas written by Tulsidas ji. He wrote that समरथ को नहीं कुछ दोष गोसाई रवि पावक सुर सरी की नाई. I would just transliterate it for the non-Hindi speakers and even for the Hindi speakers, because I understand that this is written in Jan Bhasha, so it is not. So Samarath means one who is all capable, and Dosh we all know is maybe means anything which is bad. So Samarath ko kuch nahi dosh gosai means one who is all capable, who is all powerful, is having no means black spots on his or her deeds. This is how they transliterate it. I will come to my explanation of the same. And then they have given an anecdote in the form of Ravi Pavak Sur Sari Ki Nai. So Ravi is sun and Pavak means the fire, and Sursari means the rivers. So in the same manner, the rivers, the fire, and the sun. So people who are powerful need not worry. But the thing is that Tulsidas has written this Ramcharitmanas from value perspective. So he has tried to convey value to the society. And through these couplet, he has expressed that who is the person who is having the samarth. So again, in various ways, he has conveyed it. I would not like to take your time explaining those things, but the gist or the crux is that people who have tolerance, people who have value systems, they are the people on whom whatever allegations you make, they would not hold any truth. And it is as simple as that. Whatever kind of shade you try to build to the sun, whatever kind of barricades you try to bring to the water, which is ever flowing from the Himalayas to the Bay of Bengal or to the other seas, and the fire, which is when its own is very belligerent, so you cannot stop it, the jungle fire. So the thing is that people who are having the value system, with whatever power you try to malign them, you would not be able to malign them, because internal strength is very much. And again, when I come back to that statement, decent means middle class, and middle class means the value proposition which is there in the society. And the value proposition to the society has not come in one day. It is a genetic profiling of the society which is there. I'm sorry I have to say this again, that again, today, in a transition from the middle class to the affluence, we feel that if we shed all the value systems, then we become affluent. That's not the case.
So that was, I would say, a very important piece of analysis that you just now presented, because most of the times when it comes to the Indian middle class families, especially the young ones, I would say, the children who are in growing years, there is this kind of a mindset. I would put it down to maybe peer pressure, that when you, I would so-called, try to get rid of these values which are very much intrinsic to any family, a middle class family, then you would belong there where you want to belong. So that kind of misconception is very important, that since childhood only we should, train our children, and nothing against any section of the society. See, that is the beauty about the being middle class. We have nothing against anyone, but the problem is, like Dr. Bejon Mishra, a very renowned person who works a lot in the consumer affairs business, he put it this way, that, whenever you talk about any economic policies, programs of any government, any country, they always say that, when it comes to the criticism of it, they always say the rich is getting richer, the poor is getting poorer. But you see, in this thing, middle class doesn't even feature. There is no mention of middle class. So in some way, there is, of course, sense of feeling alienation. Do you think also, I would like you to talk about that. Is it something to do with the fact that on the premise on which we started, that we don't chunk a sizable, I would say, vote bank the moment we are recognized, because see, that's a sad reality of our democratic setup. There are different sections which are identified as vote bank, and accordingly the political parties, irrespective of any political party, I would say, they pander, they cater to that their constituency. But middle class somehow, is it something to do with the fact that the voting percentage is very low when it comes to Indian middle class? They don't even matter in the priority list of the government. Is that also, you think, the case?
This is very interesting question, and I have been writing to forums on this. That why do not we classify the society into economic classes when, for all practical purposes, we classify the society into economical classes or economic classes? The day you define the society into, say, 6 income groups, I1 to I6, I think that middle class and their votes would matter. But today, where is the middle class? The middle class is divided into Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Isai, is divided into upper class, lower caste, then is divided into region, religion, language they speak. So where is the middle class? The middle class has been very smartly over the years by successive governments categorized into what they are not. They have been categorized into what they are not. And what they are, nobody is talking about. If I am living into a society and 100 people are there, it never comes to my mind that what caste or creed they belong to. My kid plays with n number of other kids, and I never see that what is their religion or caste or what is their background. And it is also bridging the gap. I don't even look into the pockets that whether he is falling into the 30% tax bracket or 20% tax bracket or 10% tax bracket. They all are mingling well. A homogeneous society is developing. It is a very healthy society. But the moment the kid enters class 10 and applies for IIT JEE, he comes to know that, okay, it is no more that my friend is my friend. My friend belongs to X class, Y economic category, and therefore gets X kind of reservation. So it's nothing about against reservation, but I believe that the poor in all society, all segments of the society, should be given some kind of leverage, some kind of preference as far as access to the amenities are concerned. But dividing the middle class into castes is what has played havoc on the society today. And it has also played, it has also depleted the value system which the society used to carry. Today, there is a lot of hatred among people. They are sitting together, having lunch together. They belong to middle class, but mentally they are not united. And that is where the vote bank politics is playing its role.
what I'm getting a sense, what you're suggesting is that is the infamous divide and rule policies of the erstwhile British government, and then of course the successive governments who have come to power post 1947. So the same divide and rule policy is being applied very dangerously to the middle class also. And that also is one of the reasons why there is so much of divisions, and we don't have a voice collectively. That is the point. Collectively, you don't have a voice. Today, if someone is having a concern, now, for example, I'm not suggesting through this forum that we should have a union of the middle class, because I guess most of the time, nothing against these trade unions. They have done a lot for the welfare of the workers, whichever unions you talk about, whether it be farmer unions or labor union, any kind of union. But I'm not suggesting that. But I guess in some way, this divide and rule policy applied to the middle class, somehow there is so much of fissures, divisions, resentment among themselves that nobody wants to stand up for anybody else. Now today, if you see, just to take the recent example, what we talked about, the farmers, I mean, you see the numbers, it's staggering. It's a huge number of people, at least they all have come together. Let's not get into the issues that's between the democratically elected government and for them to sort out, and they will sort out. They are talking, dialogue is on, it's not for us to comment on that. But I'm just amazed with the organization skills of different sections, which is very strikingly lacking when it comes to middle class. Have you ever seen? Now it's a very interesting conversation. I don't want to let you go very soon, but I would just take you 5-10 minutes more of yours. We have been part of the media, mainstream media organization also, and there's always this criticism whenever these crimes against women happens. Middle class is always accused of selective outrage. I have often been asked this question, that what happened on December 16, on that cold Delhi night, couple of years back, known as a Nirbhaya case. This girl, she was somewhat, coming from the middle class family. The outrage was huge. Now, a couple of years later, in Mumbai, what happened? A 23-year-old photojournalist. Again, a very brutal crime was committed against her. Then there was again a sense of huge outrage with candle march and all. Now, my point is, people say that middle class is very selective when it comes to its outrage. It only, expresses itself when someone from them, as in someone from the middle class, gets affected by it. Now, my point is, once I was posed this question on a forum, that the day Nirbhaya was picked up on that fateful night and what all atrocities happened to her, same day about, more than 50 girls were raped, same day. But, the kind of outrage that Nirbhaya evoked, do you think middle class is also somewhat to be blamed for this sense of selective outrage? How I put it, I'll tell you before I would like you to come in. See, any reasonable, sensible person, no matter which class he or she belongs, he will have empathy, he will have sympathy for anyone, if any wrong is committed to anyone. No matter which part of the country, which section of the society, I would say reasonable, sensible, logical person would have that fear. How I look at it, why a Nirbhaya case or a photojournalist case in Mumbai evoked that kind of outrage, that a lot of candle march and many middle class people coming out on the roads, which normally they don't do, is because, empathy, sympathy was there, but when it happens to someone like someone from a middle class family, what happens? It evokes a different kind of fear that, it can happen to me also, for that matter. It can happen to us also. If it can happen to that person who is somewhat belonging to, say, our kind of class, our kind of upbringing and lifestyle. So how do you look at that? Do you think it's fair to criticize middle class for selective outrage?
See, at the point where you have left me on this discussion, my mind gets disturbed. For I don't feel that these kind of events should happen in this society at all. And the norms for or the laws for such events should be very, very stringent, so that uh, it 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 does not even send a signal into the mind of the most pervert person to commit this kind of heinous crime. Uh, I am totally dumbstruck at this very emotional issue. However, when we are talking about the middle class and the behavior the middle class exhibits, there are many things to it. One thing which I would like to bring in from my academic experience is that we all have to manage a classroom. So suppose that if a classroom is of 60, there would be 15 students who would be bright, and there would be 15 students with whom you cannot do whatever amount of effort you do, not because I want to criticize those students, because of this economic background. They are coming from an affluent background and their purpose is just to pass the course somehow, so they are not into academics. So you are now left with 30 students, which is exactly 50% of the 60 class, 60 batch size of 60. Now this 50% would determine your acceptance as a successful teacher, or a teacher who was not able to manage the class. So whom you have to control? You have to control those middle people, those middle class. And who guides them? They will either be guided by those 15 who are the backbenchers. And I don't criticize backbenchers. I have been myself been backbencher in many lectures for reasons whatsoever, because in the front there are disturbances. So to get the attention, I used to sit in the back and then respond to the faculty, so that the faculty could understand that backbenchers are always not bad people. But so if you are able to incite enthusiasm in the top 15 in the classroom, then the middle class will have a herd mentality towards these top 15. Else these middle class will have a herd mentality towards the other 15. I told earlier also today on this forum that middle class is always looking towards leaders. They cannot lead. Now, coming on to these grave events which happened and the responses of the middle class which were there. See, it's very simple, plain and clear. Middle class is not set of 10 individuals. It varies from one event to another, one place to another. If electricity is not there in my society for say even 20 hours, my outrage would not be that I go and block the road, and none of my society members would go and block the road. But not to take anything from anyone, but from another type of society, if there is electricity cut from morning to evening, in the evening there will be road blockage, that why electricity supply is not there. And initially there are 2-3 people who lead them, who lead the sentiments, and then they create a movement. You see the entire JP movement or the Ahimsa movement created by Mahatma Gandhi, they were not big movements to start with. They were just one sentiment. And how they say that it was just an individual who started with movement, and then people started joining the movement, and it became a great revolution kind of thing. So the middle class is always there to follow. The middle class is very timid. Even if somebody pelts one stone, the middle class will look after his son, daughter, and wife, and they will try to be safe within the confined 4 walls of their place of residence. So it takes a lot of gut to face the police and to lead the candle march. And let me confess that people who are leading the candle march, people who are on the streets are not the typical middle class. Either they are the aggrieved person, as you are rightly saying, or they are people who want to lead the society from one event to another. The middle class never goes onto the street.
So the middle class, a couple of quite interesting observations. Middle class, you said they cannot lead. They always look forward to a leader. They always want a leader who could lead them. And that also, I would say, is something to do with the characteristic, the typical mindset, which I would say, in a way, responsible for some of the resentment that they may have against the establishment. But then it's also time that the middle class must look within and try to see where they can go for a course correction or not. I would say, Dr. Nilmani, that it's been an absolute pleasure and honor to speak to you and to get your sense, your understanding, and your because you come from both the sides. You are a policymaker. You are involved in the execution of the policies also. You also consider yourself as a Indian middle class person. Now, before I let you go, the last one. I know Ramcharitmanas and Bhagavad Gita, they have been the guiding philosophies of your life. A parting shot for the middle class from these two epics or from anywhere, from your side. What would you one line?
Yeah, please come again. I could not get you last line.
Okay, what I'm saying is that the Ramcharitmanas and Bhagavad Gita, they have been the guiding philosophies, the principles of your life. And I would like you to quote either from them or from your side a parting shot for the middle class. What is one thing you would like to tell middle class, a message for the middle class as we move into the new year?
From Ramcharitmanas, as of now, what comes to my mind is that क्षमा धर्म का मूल है, पाप मूल अभिमान, तुलसी दया न छोड़िए जब लगे घटने प्राण. Meaning wherein that whatever are the consequences, try to forgive. For people are innocent and have pity on them, try to identify them, try to help them, and let the middle class prevail. Let the middle path prevail. From one of the Krishna statement, not particularly from Bhagavad Gita, I would like to say that Sanghe Sakti Yuge Yuge. So united we stand, divided we fall. We all need to look into it. We have to come out from our selfish thoughts that if I do this, what will happen to me and my immediate son. Look towards the society at large. Every small kid who is there on the road you can treat him or her as your son or a person whom you can take care of. And at the last, for the kids who come to, if they can watch this, having done these two, please also have a note from the Chanakya Niti or the Chanakya Niti, probably it is, Sathe Satyam Samachare. So by the time you become an adult and you are able to understand that people are pervert, people have malified intentions, and if you are into policy making, if you are into policy execution, try to identify those people, make stringent norms so that the society does not go into lawlessness, because it is the law which safeguards the middle class. It is the law which protects the middle class. It is the law which has made the society prevail so long. So on this note, I thank Middle Class Hub and the entire team of the Middle Class Hub for giving me an opportunity to voice my concerns and express my thoughts on how I relate myself to middle class, how I feel that I am a person of middle class, and how I am concerned about the upliftment and the well-being of the middle class. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nilmani. I must say it has been absolute pleasure, and it will be so interesting for my viewers to watch this conversation, because so many insightful things you have presented during this conversation. Thank you once again, and I look forward to many more such conversations in future. Thank you so much,
Thank
Doctor.
you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.